A poor single dad let a strange girl stay for the night, not knowing she was a billionaire's daughter, or that she'd fall in love with him. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Ethan said, his voice low but warm as heavy rain poured down onto his shoulders. "This isn't a safe place for anyone at 2 in the morning." The girl turned quickly, startled. Her dark hair was soaked and clung to her cheeks, her wide eyes filled with fear. She glanced around like she was either expecting someone or running from them. "I don't need your pity," she snapped, hugging herself tighter. Ethan didn't flinch, still wearing his city sanitation uniform, reflective stripes glowing faintly under the Cincinnati streetlight. He kept a respectful distance. "It's not pity," he replied. "I'm offering a place with hot water and no strangers holding knives." She hesitated. Her lips trembled, not just from the cold. Her fingers tightened, eyes fixed on the dark alley behind her like danger was still lurking. "What happened?" Ethan asked, his voice softer now. She looked down. I got robbed. My phone's dead. My bag's gone." Ethan let the silence sit for a beat. His mind went to the little girl asleep back home. But something in this girl's posture, the way she stood in the rain with equal parts pride and fear, made him stay. "My place is 2 blocks from here," he said. "It's not much, but it's warm. You can take the couch for the night." The two of them walked silently through the steady downpour on Vine Street in Cincinnati. Ethan kept a respectful distance behind the girl, close enough to keep an eye out for trouble, but not so close as to scare her. Their shadows, cast by the flickering street lamps, stretched across the glistening sidewalk. "My house is just around the corner," he said, pointing toward a row of aging duplexes. 3 more minutes." The girl didn't respond. Her soaked shoes made soft slapping sounds against the pavement. Every step looked like a struggle. The cold had clearly reached her bones. Ethan noticed her trembling, even though she tried to hide it. His house was small, 2 stories, red brick faded with time. He climbed the worn steps and unlocked the door with a key still damp with rain from his jacket pocket. "Go ahead," he said. "Careful, the last step gets slippery." She stepped inside, cautious, like entering a world entirely unfamiliar. The scent of old wood, warm air, and a faint trace of something like cookies mixed together. Not fancy, but comforting. "You can leave your shoes there on the mat," Ethan said, nodding toward the entrance. "Here's a dry towel." She accepted the beige towel, frayed at the edges, but clean and soft, with the scent of laundry soap. Almost instinctively, she wiped her hair, then wrapped the towel around her neck, clinging to the warmth like a lifeline. "Bathroom's to the left," Ethan added. "You can take a shower if you'd like. Takes a minute for the water to heat." He headed down the hallway to a small back room. Unlocking the top drawer of an old desk, he tucked away his wallet and keys, not because he didn't trust her, but because survival had taught him caution. When he returned, he carried a clean hoodie, a towel, and a neatly folded blanket. "Sofa's yours for the night. The sweatshirt's big, but it's dry." She took everything with both hands, still silent. But something in her eyes had shifted. Less panic, more disbelief. She disappeared into the bathroom, the door closing softly behind her. Ethan stepped into the kitchen. He placed a mug of water in the microwave, then scribbled a short note in neat handwriting on a piece of paper. "If you need to call someone, the house phone's on the wall. There are more blankets in the closet. Please keep the door closed. My daughter's a light sleeper." He placed the note beside the steaming mug, then quietly made his way to the bedroom. It wasn't a large room, just big enough for a double bed, a messy bookshelf, and children's watercolor paintings taped to the wall. In the middle of the bed, 6-year-old Sophie slept curled up, her brown curls fanned across the pillow. Ethan gently pulled the blanket up over her and lay down beside her, exhaling slowly. Camille emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, hair damp around her shoulders, the oversized sweatshirt hiding her arms completely. She looked around the modest living room, a small bookshelf stacked with kids' books, a pink backpack near the door, and a pair of little shoes neatly placed beneath a chair. She spotted the mug of water, still steaming, and the folded note. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper before she picked up the cup with both hands. The warmth seeped into her palms, then into her chest, then somewhere deeper. For the first time in days, she didn't feel like she had to be ready to run. She curled up on the couch, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and listened as the rain softened outside the window. Somewhere behind a closed door, a father lay beside his child. And on this old sofa, in a home that wasn't hers, under a blanket that smelled like someone else's laundry, Camille finally slept. No one had asked her name. No one had judged her. No one expected anything in return. Only silence, warmth, and a man who, in a world that had offered her nothing but indifference, had done the one thing no one else had: believe she deserved to feel safe. Camille woke to a strange but comforting smell drifting through the barely cracked living room door. Something like fried eggs, slightly burnt toast, and was that the sound of laughter? Soft morning light filtered through the pale curtains, warming the space more than any heater could. For a moment, she kept her eyes closed, savoring the rare sensation of waking up to something other than honking cars or hurried footsteps on pavement. A small voice nearby broke the quiet. "Are you the princess who slept on our couch?" Camille opened her eyes. Just a few feet away, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, sat cross-legged on the carpet, hugging a stuffed dinosaur. Her curly brown hair bounced slightly as she tilted her head, wide eyes filled with innocent curiosity. Camille blinked. "Excuse me?" "My name's Sophie," the girl said proudly. "Daddy said a nice lady stayed over because it was raining. I think you must be a princess, 'cause only princesses get to sleep on our couch." Camille chuckled softly, a little embarrassed, but oddly touched. "Well, I suppose that makes sense. Nice to meet you, Sophie." From the kitchen, a voice called out, "Sophie, come help me burn the toast." "Coming!" Sophie shouted, then dashed off, leaving Camille sitting there, slightly dazed, but smiling. She stood, adjusted the oversized sweatshirt she was still wearing, and slowly followed the smell into the kitchen. It was small, painted in faded cream, with wooden shelves that had clearly seen years of use. Yet everything was tidy, lived in. Ethan stood at the stove, one hand cracking eggs into a skillet, while the other stirred something in a pan. "You cook?" Camille asked, unable to hide her surprise. Ethan glanced at her. "Only when Sophie's brave enough to eat it. Want to help?" She hesitated. "I can try, but full disclosure, I'm not exactly kitchen material." "Perfect," he said, handing her a whisk. "That makes 2 of us. As long as we don't set the place on fire, we'll be fine." Camille took the whisk and began mixing the eggs. Awkward, but careful. Sophie climbed onto a stool to help butter the slightly over-toasted bread. Everything was going well until Camille attempted to flip the eggs. The spatula slipped, the bowl tipped, and raw eggs splattered across the counter and onto the floor. "Oh no," she gasped, reaching for a towel. "It's fine," Ethan said calmly, wiping up the mess. "We spill stuff all the time." Sophie handed Camille a paper towel with a grin. "Dad once microwaved waffles," until they exploded. Camille looked at her, and suddenly, unexpectedly, laughed. Not a polite laugh, not forced. A real, unguarded laugh. Sophie giggled in return. Ethan said nothing, but the corners of his mouth lifted. When breakfast was ready, Camille eyed Ethan's plate with concern. The eggs were overcooked, the toast a bit too crunchy, and the bacon looked like jerky. "You don't have to eat that," she said softly. "I know it's awful." Ethan took a bite anyway. "I'm hungry, and it's food. That's good enough." Sophie nibbled on her eggs, occasionally glancing toward the oven. Camille didn't catch it at first, but later she noticed Ethan discreetly pulling out a second plate of food he had kept warm, just in case. She saw it, but said nothing. After breakfast, while Sophie built a Lego tower on the floor, Camille stood by the sink washing dishes. Ethan joined her silently. "You know," she said after a while, "I can't remember the last time I had breakfast with anyone." He didn't look at her, just smiled slightly. "Welcome to the kingdom of burnt toast and messy counters." She laughed again, a little louder this time. And in that old kitchen, surrounded by chipped mugs and a sticky egg-covered counter, something unfamiliar, but deeply comforting, settled inside her. Not love, not gratitude, but the faint, flickering warmth of peace. Something she hadn't felt in a very, very long time. That morning, after Sophie had left for school, Camille sat at the kitchen table, holding a cup of ginger tea Ethan had made. The air still carried a bit of early morning chill, along with the kind of quiet comfort that came when words weren't necessary. "Can I borrow your phone to call an Uber?" Camille asked, eyes fixed on the window. Ethan was drying the last dish. "Where are you headed?" "I'm not sure," she admitted, "but I can't just stay here doing nothing. I need to find work." Ethan nodded. "I get it." He disappeared into the bedroom and came back with a folded note and a light jacket. "I know someone, Maria. She manages a laundromat a few blocks down. If you really want a job, I can walk you there." Camille took the note, scanned it briefly. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, but she nodded. "Okay." The laundromat sat on a side street between a second-hand shop and a small Mexican bakery. The faded sign above read, "Queen's Laundry" in chipped red letters. Inside, the blast of hot steam and bleach hit Camille like a wave. The air was thick, heavy, clinging to her clothes and skin. The constant rumble of machines echoed through the cramped space, the sound of spinning drums like a relentless heartbeat. Behind the counter stood a Latina woman in her 50s, her hair tied in a tight bun, arms folded as she eyed a mountain of freshly dried white towels. When she noticed Ethan, she simply nodded. "New girl?" she asked, barely glancing at Camille. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "She's looking for work. Could you give her a shot?" Maria didn't say another word. She handed Camille a dark blue apron, still damp and bleach-stained, and pointed toward the back. "Work starts now." 3 hours later, Camille was slumped against the emergency exit behind the laundromat, the metal steps digging into her legs. Her apron was wrinkled, her hands raw and red from hot water and detergent, her fingers shriveled like she'd been swimming too long. One customer had yelled at her for losing a sock, which she later found still inside the dryer. Another had dropped off 3 heavy bags of half-wet laundry with a curt, "I'll be back at 5. Don't mess it up." Camille had once studied art theory. She'd posed for student fashion shoots and sipped overpriced coffee while arguing about social philosophy. And now her hands were scrubbing grease-stained kitchen aprons and wringing out wet sheets. For the first time in days, she wanted to cry. Not from pain, but from the sharp sting of her ego cracking open. What the hell am I doing here? Is this what freedom really looks like? She pulled a dead phone from her pocket. No signal. No way to reach anyone. Her reflection in the rusted door panel startled her. Messy hair, tired eyes, a face she barely recognized. This wasn't Camille Harrington. Not the polished daughter of Winston Harrington. This was someone else entirely. A girl trying to survive. That evening, when she returned to Ethan's house, Camille didn't say a word. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes, wincing at the blisters on her heels. She unknotted her apron with trembling fingers, like she was peeling off the last layer of pride she had left. Ethan didn't question her. He glanced at her feet, said nothing, and kept rinsing lettuce at the sink. The next morning, Camille planned to leave early. But when she opened the front door, she froze. There, sitting neatly on the doormat, was a clean pair of white sneakers. Not designer, not brand new, but scrubbed spotless, and unmistakably her size. Inside one of the shoes was a folded piece of paper. "I thought your feet deserved better. If you're going to walk away, at least don't walk in pain." Camille stood motionless, holding the note in both hands, staring at the shoes. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but eventually she put them on. Later that morning, as Ethan returned from his overnight shift, unzipping his jacket and rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he paused at the kitchen door. Camille was already there, fiddling awkwardly with the toaster. "You didn't leave," he said, sounding honestly surprised. "I almost did," she admitted. "But your guilt trip shoes worked." Ethan smirked. "They weren't meant to make you feel guilty." "No?" she asked. "They were meant to remind you that you always have a choice." She didn't answer. But when she placed a plate of toast on the table, her hands weren't trembling like they had been the night before. After a week, Camille's hands had started to adapt to the heat of the water and the sting of the soap. The blisters had turned to calluses. She learned to sort fabric by texture and weight. More importantly, she learned how to greet customers with a smile that no longer felt forced. Each afternoon after her shift, Camille returned to the little house that smelled of warm wood and real life. She helped Ethan with dinner, tidied up with Sophie, and sometimes even read bedtime stories. Sophie clung to Camille like a happy little shadow. They developed their own secret language. The wink they shared when sneaking cookies past Ethan, the way Camille pretended to lose during puzzle games, or how they came up with superhero names for Sophie's growing collection of stuffed animals. The three of them, not bound by blood but by quiet kindness, had slowly started to feel like a family. One Saturday evening, Ethan got a large laundry order from a hotel downtown. More than 100 bedsheets, towels, and uniforms that needed to be washed, dried, folded, and delivered before morning. "We'll have to work late tonight," Ethan said as they finished dinner. "Count me in," Camille replied. "Can I be counted too?" Sophie asked, her mouth still smeared with spaghetti sauce. "Only if you fold better than last time," Ethan teased, tapping her nose. The laundromat at night had a strange kind of magic. No customers, no phone ringing, just the rhythmic hum of dryers and the soft yellow light reflecting off piles of crisp white linens. Camille folded towels, Sophie carefully stacked them into baskets, and Ethan moved between the dryers and the ironing board like clockwork. No one complained about the hour. There were only silly conversations, giggles from Sophie when Camille dropped an entire stack of towels, and a quiet, lingering look of gratitude in Ethan's eyes. Around 2 a.m., they loaded the freshly folded laundry into Ethan's old pickup truck. Camille sat in the passenger seat, half asleep, while Sophie snoozed in the back, hugging her stuffed rabbit. "There are 3 more drop-offs," Ethan said. "Let's split up. Can you take this bag to number 18? The one with the porch light on?" Camille nodded and stepped out, carrying the large laundry bag. The house looked perfectly ordinary. Trimmed lawn, well-lit porch. Camille climbed the steps and set the bag down. Just as she stood back up, the porch light shut off. In that instant, she turned, and then came the barking. Loud, sharp, and close. A large black dog exploded from the side yard, its eyes catching a red glint in the darkness. Its paws scraped the brick patio with a terrifying rhythm, teeth bared, growling louder with each step. Camille froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She tried to scream, but nothing came out. She stumbled backward, her foot slipping off the step, and she hit the pavement hard. Pain shot through her ankle. Her hands scraped against the rough concrete, warm blood already welling on her palm. Then, a car door slammed. Ethan was already running. No hesitation. He threw himself between Camille and the dog, arms spread wide. "Back off," he shouted, voice low and commanding. The dog skidded to a halt, barking furiously. The growling echoed in the narrow street. But after a tense second, it backed away, disappearing into the shadows. Camille sat on the ground, gasping, clutching her ankle. Ethan knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" "No, just twisted it," she whispered. Without a word, he lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Camille wanted to argue, but couldn't. Her arms instinctively wrapped around his shoulders, her breath still shaky. He set her down gently in the passenger seat and shut the door. "I'm sorry," she said, voice hoarse. "I thought I could—" "You were supposed to stay in the truck," Ethan snapped, his voice sharper than she'd ever heard it. "It was just a laundry bag." "I don't care about the laundry," he shouted, then stopped, his voice cracked. "I care about you. You could have been bitten. Do you get that?" Camille looked at him. His face was tense, jaw clenched, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. It hit her then. He wasn't angry because she messed up. He was angry because he was scared. For her. And in that moment, something in Camille's chest cracked open. For the first time, someone's fear wasn't about control, or pride, or reputation. It was about not losing her. The walls she'd spent years building up around herself, quietly, softly, they began to fall. Morning light streamed through the back window of the laundromat, casting a soft glow over a stack of freshly folded towels. Camille sat low behind the counter, folding each one like it was part of some quiet ritual. She smoothed the edges with care, lining them up perfectly. Ethan was nearby, working on the jammed drawer of the industrial washer. Sophie wasn't around. It was a full day at school, and the shop was slower than usual. Camille reached into the laundry basket and pulled out a white robe. As she lifted it, something small fell from the folds, clinking softly against the wood counter. A necklace. But not just any necklace. It was delicate. A white gold chain, with a small sapphire drop that shimmered like frozen rain under the light. It trembled where it landed, as if it knew it didn't belong here. Camille froze. She had hidden that necklace deep in the side pocket of her duffel, wrapped in an old sock. Somehow, it had slipped into the laundry. Before she could grab it, Ethan turned around. He stopped. His eyes landed on the necklace, then lifted slowly to her face. A breathless silence fell between them. "That," Ethan said quietly, "doesn't look like something a broke college student carries around." Camille didn't speak. She picked up the necklace and tucked it quickly into her back pocket. "I forgot it was in there." Ethan crossed his arms, his expression harder now. "Who are you?" She looked away. "Who are you, really?" Another long silence. Finally, her voice came out low, almost hollow. I'm someone who walked away from a world where everything has a price, except love. Ethan stepped back slightly, as if something had just broken between them. You lied to me. I didn't lie. You just didn't tell me. That's the same thing to me. Camille's lips trembled, her eyes glassy. I didn't think I owed you an explanation. You stayed in my house. You met my daughter. You used a fake name. Worked in a place I vouched for. And you think you don't owe me the truth? If you had known who I was, you'd have treated me differently. She shot back. You'd have judged me. You're just like everyone else. I don't care who you are, Ethan said, shaking his head. I care that you weren't honest. That hit her harder than she expected. Camille stood there, motionless. The machines kept humming, filling the room with an almost cruel normalcy. At last, she reached behind her neck, untied her apron, and placed it gently on the counter. I'll go. Ethan didn't stop her. She had barely stepped out onto the sidewalk when a male voice called out, There she is, Camille Harrington. She turned and froze. A man in a leather jacket and baseball cap was walking toward her with his phone out, snapping photos as fast as he could. The camera flashed again and again. You've been missing for 5 days, sweetheart. Your daddy's offering 6 figures to anyone who finds you. Camille backed up, panic flooding her chest. Ethan burst through the laundromat door. Hey, get out of here! The man shrugged. Relax, man. Just doing my job. Your job? Ethan growled, grabbing Camille's arm. Come on, now. They ran out the back door of the laundromat, tearing through the narrow alley. Camille's breath came in ragged gasps, her tears mixing with the cold wind. Their shadows stretched behind them on the stained pavement as they ducked behind a pair of abandoned delivery trucks. Ethan finally stopped, pulling her into the narrow space between the trucks, both of them panting hard. You know now, don't you? Camille said, voice barely above a whisper, still trembling. Ethan didn't answer right away. He braced his hands on his knees, catching his breath. I suspected. Now I'm sure. So, what do you think of me now? He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, I think, if you want to keep living like a real person, they can't find you again. She stared at him, eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, when her secret was out, no one tried to control her. No one shamed her. Only protection. Without conditions. Without demands. Only him. It was just after dusk, when Ethan turned into the familiar neighborhood in Cincinnati, parking his truck in a back alley behind the house. He scanned the street carefully, a new habit, born from this morning's run-in with the paparazzi. Camille sat beside him in silence. Her hands clenched the edge of her coat. She stared ahead, but her eyes didn't seem to see anything. Inside her, everything was tangled. Fear, confusion, and something that felt dangerously close to regret. Wait here, Ethan said quietly. I'll check around first. But Camille had already opened her door. Number, if they're here, I need to face them. As they stepped into the front yard, it was already clear. A sleek black luxury car was parked directly in front of Ethan's small home. 2 men in black suits stood stiffly by the vehicle, earpieces in place, scanning the area with professional detachment. The front door to Ethan's house was open. Ethan picked up his pace, instinctively placing himself between Camille and the porch. Then, from the doorway, a man emerged. He was tall, perfectly composed, silver hair slicked back, dressed in a gray tailored suit that whispered old money and control. Every step he took was calculated, confident. Winston Harrington. Emma, he said coldly, get in the car. Camille froze. Ethan didn't move aside. You're her father." "I am Winston Harrington," the man replied, without even glancing at Ethan. "And you've been hiding my daughter from her family." Ethan's expression didn't change. "I gave her a couch to sleep on when she had nowhere else to go. I bought her shoes when her feet were bleeding from 10-hour shifts. I didn't hide her. She chose to stay." Winston's eyes scanned the surroundings, the peeling paint, the cracked porch, the old truck. He sneered. "This place? This life? It's beneath her. My daughter wasn't born to live like this." Ethan stepped forward, calm but firm. "I'm not keeping her, but I won't hand her over like a briefcase either." The air grew heavier. Winston's gloved hands clenched at his sides. "You don't understand. She's part of something bigger, a legacy, a future that was designed for her." Camille stepped forward, her voice low but steady. "I wasn't forced to run away, but I was never free to choose, either." Winston turned to her, his sharp gaze twitching, if only slightly. "You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. You don't understand what you're giving up." "No, Dad," she replied. "I understand it perfectly. I lived it for 25 years. Winston motioned to one of the men by the car. "Get in. We'll discuss this at home." Ethan looked at Camille. His tone softened, but his words were clear. "You don't have to go. Not if you don't want to." Camille met his eyes. She saw no pressure there, no anger, no expectation. Only respect. And that made the decision even harder. "No one's making you leave," Ethan said again. "But if you feel like you have no choice, then maybe you're not really free yet." Camille gripped the strap of her bag. Her eyes brimmed, but no tears fell. "I have to go," she whispered. "No one's forcing me. But the world won't leave me alone. Unless I do." Winston stood silently. He was used to giving orders, but this wasn't something he could command. Camille walked slowly toward the car. One of the bodyguards opened the door. She paused, her back to Ethan. Without turning around, she said quietly, "I'm sorry." The door shut behind her. The sound was quiet, but it might as well have been a door closing on an entire chapter. Ethan stood on the porch, watching the taillights fade into the misty evening. He didn't speak, didn't call after her. He just stood there, one hand gripping the splintering wood of the railing, his eyes dark. Inside, the house hadn't changed. The tea mug Camille had used that morning was still in the sink. Her hoodie was draped over the back of the sofa. But the house had never felt this empty. Cold wind swept through the damp streets of Cincinnati, slipping through door gaps and foggy window panes. Inside the small house, the dim yellow kitchen light could not chase away the growing emptiness in Ethan's heart. Camille was gone. No promises, no goodbyes. Ethan returned to his night shifts, stale coffee cans and solitary breakfasts. But what worried him most was Sophie. The little girl who used to chatter from morning till night had suddenly fallen eerily quiet. It started with a dry cough, then came sleepless nights, flushed cheeks, and a persistent fever. Ethan tried everything, fever meds, cool towels, but nothing seemed to help. One morning, he carried Sophie to the hospital. In the crowded waiting room, the sound of her shallow breathing felt like a ticking time bomb. Ethan filled out the intake form, his eyes never leaving his daughter's pale face. The receptionist glanced at the paperwork, then looked up and said in a flat voice, "You'll need to make a $500 deposit before we can admit her." Ethan froze. $500? After rent, utilities, and medicine, he barely had $100 left. I don't have that much on me, but I can find a way. Today. Please." The receptionist said nothing, just gave him that look, the one they reserved for people who'd said the same thing dozens of times before. Sophie coughed again, her head resting weakly on Ethan's chest. He held her closer, his heart crushed under the weight of helplessness. Then, a calm, clear voice spoke from behind him. "I'll cover everything. List me as the guarantor." Ethan turned sharply. Camille was standing there, her hair neatly tied, wearing a cream-colored trench coat. She no longer looked like the girl who had once shivered under a rain-soaked blanket. She looked like a woman who had chosen to reclaim her life. She stepped up to the counter, pulled out her wallet, and presented her ID. The receptionist's demeanor changed instantly. Fingers tapped briskly on the keyboard, and a nurse was called to escort Sophie inside. Camille walked over to Ethan. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. "I'm not doing this out of obligation. I'm doing it for her and for you." Ethan remained silent, but something in his eyes softened, not anger, but gratitude and relief. In the hospital waiting room, white fluorescent lights cast quiet shadows over their tired faces. Camille sat nearby, hands wrapped around a cup of weak coffee. Ethan sat across from her, eyes fixed on the closed door behind which Sophie was being monitored. Neither of them spoke, but in that silence, something had shifted. No need for apologies, no need for grand declarations. Just her presence, timely and steady, was enough to mend what had once felt broken. Ethan turned to look at Camille. She was looking back, a faint smile. No makeup, no armor, just Camille, completely herself. And for the first time in days, Ethan exhaled. Deeply, fully. Late afternoon. Cincinnati shimmered under the golden glow of an autumn sunset, the city's high-rise windows catching the fading light like glass stage lights. Camille stepped out of the elevator on the 37th floor, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. Every step across the cold marble echoed with the weight of the confrontation she'd long avoided. The penthouse door opened. The butler gave a silent nod and stepped aside. Winston Harrington sat by the window, back straight, his tailored suit flawless. In one hand, he gently swirled a glass of wine, but hadn't taken a sip. Behind him, the city blinked with lights, like an audience waiting for a final line. He turned as Camille entered. "You've come back," he said, his voice calm but loaded. Camille looked at the man who once seemed invincible. But now, in his eyes, there was no power play, only uncertainty. "I'm not coming back," she replied. "I came to say, I choose to live on my own terms." Winston set the glass on the edge of the sleek coffee table. The sound was soft, but sharp, like a blade being sheathed. "You choose to live with a laundromat worker?" "I choose to live with someone who saved me, without knowing who I was." "And what can he give you?" "Not money, but honesty and care." Winston flinched, not out of anger, but confusion. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, for the first time in her memory, he exhaled like a man. Not a mogul, not a legend. "I never knew how else to protect you," he finally said. "I thought keeping you above it all was the only way to shield you." Camille's smile was bittersweet, her eyes glassy with emotion. "And that's why I couldn't breathe." Silence fell. Father and daughter stood still, not to win, but to understand. Winston took a step closer, the chandelier's light catching the silver strands in his neatly combed hair. He didn't reach out to touch her, but he was close enough that his words came low and clear. "You used to hide behind your mother's skirt," he murmured. "Now, you're more like her than I ever realized." Camille nodded slightly, then turned toward the door. "I'm leaving now." Winston didn't stop her. But just before the door closed behind her, his voice followed. "Tell him, he's a lucky man." Camille paused. She turned back, her gaze no longer angry, only peaceful. Number, I'm the lucky one. The door shut gently behind her, closing one chapter and opening a new one where she no longer had to be afraid. Morning light filtered through the trees outside the porch. Cincinnati was still half asleep, but in the quiet of dawn, someone knocked on the door. Ethan stepped out, wearing a soft sweatshirt that still smelled faintly of laundry soap, his hair slightly tousled from a long night caring for his daughter. He froze when he saw Camille standing there, a small bag in her hands, hair down and slightly damp, her eyes uncertain but steady. She didn't speak right away. Then, slowly, as if each word had been rehearsed through the night. "I'm not here to ask for a place to stay. I'm here to ask if I can stay. For good." Ethan stood still, silent. Inside, the sound of small feet pounded across the wooden floor before the door flung open. "It's the princess!" Sophie squealed and threw her arms around Camille, burying her frizzy hair into Camille's thick coat that still carried the scent of early morning rain. Camille knelt down, holding the little girl tightly, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Ethan watched them, then smiled. A smile that didn't need any words. 2 months later. On a quiet corner near the Central Park, a deep green food truck parked every weekend morning. A handwritten wooden sign hung from the side. "The Morning Hug, Coffee and Joy." Camille, wearing a simple floral apron, flipped pancakes with practiced ease. Beside her, Ethan poured steaming coffee into paper cups. Sophie leaned out the side window, cheerfully calling to customers, "Would you like some extra syrup? We made it ourselves." Laughter rang out, the scent of melting butter, the gentle sizzle of eggs on the skillet, and the hum of greetings from regulars filled the air, all blending into a morning that felt like time had slowed down for happiness. Not glamorous, not extravagant, but honest and warm. Camille wiped sweat from her brow and turned to Ethan, the man who had once brought her in from the storm. He was crouched beside Sophie, tying her apron string while she asked if she could eat the slightly burnt pancake. He tapped her gently on the head, grinning. Camille watched them, and her heart felt light. "I used to have everything," she thought, "except a real home." Now, she had found it. A home not built with marble walls or crystal chandeliers, but with arms that opened when she came back. Sometimes, the thing that changes your life isn't a palace of marble or a shiny sports car. It's not a $1 million contract or a golden nameplate. Sometimes, it's just a warm blanket in the rain, the smell of a clumsy but heartfelt breakfast, a handwritten note folded neatly into a pair of clean shoes, a glance, honest and unguarded, in the middle of a stormy night. Camille once had everything people dream of: status, legacy, a future paved with certainty. But it was that night, in a tiny home with a worn-out couch, that she finally felt chosen by love. Ethan didn't rescue Camille with power. He had no fortune, no influence. The only thing he gave was unconditional kindness. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing we can offer someone. And Sophie, she didn't care about class or reputation. All she saw was that the princess who once slept on their couch was now part of their family. Children don't need reasons to love. They just need to feel that the heart reaching back is real. Winston wasn't a villain. He was a father who had lost his way in a world obsessed with appearances. Only when his daughter said, "I'm not coming back. I came to say I choose to live as I want," did he finally realize. Sometimes, love means letting go. And then, everything began with the smallest things. A weekend breakfast cart, laughter echoing on a Saturday morning, a family that wasn't perfect, but was chosen from the heart. Because happiness doesn't always come from what money can build. Sometimes it's made by the hands of ordinary people. If this story touched something in your heart, please subscribe to True Tale Time so you won't miss the next journey. A simple click, a comment, or ringing the bell is your way of walking with us through every frame of the story. Thank you for listening.